When I won the election, the candidate that I defeated said that he was going to be in the streets all my term, that he was going to protest all my term, that his purpose was not to let me govern the country. That was said. So we know that for some people, this is also a political instrument. And we have to tell that to the Colombian people. And I think seeing all this situation in a pre-election year demonstrates that there's some people that in their political interest, they're not in favor of economic recovery. They're not in favor of massive vaccination. They're not in favor of attending the poorest of the poor. Because if those things happen, it weakens their speech. The Colombian economy is projected to grow above 5%. Whose interest can be against that? The interest of those who want to capitalize chaos. Who wins if there is a delay in the vaccination program? Those who want to build their political ambitions through chaos. Who could be interested in generating a massive healthcare crisis derived from a spike of new cases that have been triggered by new conglomerates of people? Those who want to grow their political ambitions through chaos. But that's not patriotic at all. That's not honorable at all. So I think it's very important that Colombians know that, because we're thinking about the benefits of all society. Someone who wants to build their ascent to power through chaos, despair, frustration, that's not the kind of president Colombia needs in 2020. I don't think the protests are based on the tax reform. If we may look at how things have been evolving, the national strike was called even before we presented the bill before Congress. The agenda of the promoters of the strike was not dependent on the tax reform. Now, in the times we live, where fake news and misinformation moves at a faster pace than reasonability, the tax reform was misinformed, and it was used by some people to infuriate the sentiments in the streets. What the reform aimed to do was to provide cash transfers to the 50% of the Colombian population in need. It was conceived as a program so that neither the middle class nor the lowest income families would have to pay a single tax, but on the contrary, they will receive benefits that could have destroyed absolute poverty within a 3-year framework. This was the first program in Colombian history that was going to provide a basic supply of resources to more than 10 million families. And that could have made a big change. If it wasn't because of COVID-19, we would have not been calling for another fiscal reform. The reason why we called for the fiscal reform was to stabilize our finances and be able to provide resources for those social programs and be able to be aggressive in reducing poverty in Colombia. But obviously, there was a lot of misinformation. I made the call and I said, okay, let's read through it and let's try to build a proposal to protect the social safety net, because we cannot lose those programs. Those programs ought to be maintained and ought to be maintained at least until the end of next year, so that we can navigate throughout the storm of the pandemic and maybe the post-pandemic by providing resources for the people that need more support. We have governed with our principles and our values, and one of those values has been zero tolerance with any conduct from a public servant or a member of the police or the army that goes beyond the Colombian Constitution. So we have been defenders of human rights, and we have always acted in terms of law and order according to the Constitution, And the Constitution of Colombia is very clear that the mayors are the law and order authorities within their municipality, and the governors are law and order agents of the president. So all the actions that have been taken to face attacks on infrastructure, attacks on public transportation, attacks on citizens, has also been supported by the national government, and none of the actions that have been implemented have gone beyond the protocols. So if there is an accusation of a member of the police that has made a wrongdoing, yes, we condemn it and we supply all the information needed so that there can be a rapid investigation. But it's also interesting to put and to highlight that the Colombian police, for example, every single year has to address more than 30 million police procedures. Now, is there abuse within 30 million procedures? Yes, there is. But it's not systemic. And if it happens, we investigate and we sanction. If those conducts are performed that go beyond the law, in the individual cases, yes, we act and we act severely. But also, more than 500 members of the police were brutally attacked by vandalism, by low-intensity urban terrorism. We have to be very clear that we have to reject violence in any form, notwithstanding where it comes from. And especially because we know that some of those conducts and riots and events of violence are aimed to generate a brutal confrontation, to delegitimize the work of the police. People that have acted with violence, the Attorney General in Colombia has already demonstrated the linkages between those groups with armed groups like the dissidencies of FARC or ELN, you name it. But also the way that fake news has been deployed around the world in social media. You clearly can see the influence of foreign governments that want to destabilize Colombia. There's no doubt. I value what President Moreno did because his intelligence was clear in saying we have seen criminal groups that have linkages with the Maduro regime. And also we know that Maduro and his cronies have always looked at Colombia as the jewel to be conquered. And that's why they want to make an influence in the election for 2022. That's why they want to move resources. That's why they want to provide support to candidates that have a vision that is shared with them